Good evening, class. We're going to start on one of our last two modules. We'll go through, I think it'll be module 11 for this class. But we finished the textbook that we were using with the class. It had 10 chapters in it. We worked those through 10 modules. And I always like to bring some history into these classes, if at all possible. If you've taken my, healthcare informatics or healthcare economics, I usually start those classes out with Kenneth Arrow's article that was published in 1963, which a lot of healthcare economists will argue that was the seminal article that started their healthcare revolution, and they try to tie it back to changes in Medicare, Medicaid, campus TRICARE, changes in commercial health insurance. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to get into and then spend again this module and the next module. I'm going to have part one and part two, and we're going to talk about probably one of the most influential, if not the influential individual when it comes to management. And when I was in graduate school at Ohio State, there was required readings in various disciplines. If you were in the MBA program, you had to read The Art of War, and that was required reading. And you couldn't get out of there without reading and understanding it, page to page. I was on the finance economics side, and our required reading was Adam Smith's, Wealth of Nations. Made sense. If you were in any type of management discipline, the required readings was, not only did you read some of the writings of Mary Parker Follett, who was considered at least in those at that time, considered kind of the mother of management strategies. You may have had to read Alfred North Whitehead, who was a process guru. He was an English mathematician. Mary Parker Follett, born in 1868, died in 1933. Alfred North Whitehead, born in 1861, died in 1947. They kind of overlapped each other. But the one that the management professors really focused on was Frederick Winslow Taylor, born 1856, died unfortunately at a fairly young age in 1915 because of pneumonia. But Frederick Winslow Taylor, at least in the management field of study or the management discipline, is considered the father of scientific management. If you're in management, you're more than likely, especially if you're in academia and management, you're a member of the Academy of Management, AOM, and AOM determined that the principles of scientific management, published in 1911 by Frederick Taylor, was the most influential management book of the 20th century. And that's saying a lot when you've got the Academy of Management talking about a book published in 1911 being the most influential book of the 20th century. That's, you're talking about 100 years. And a lot of changes went into management strategies in those 100 years, from 1900, to 2000. So pretty impressive to have your book identified or categorized by the Academy of Management as the most influential management book in that 20th century. And when we talk about, Frederick Taylor, he had a lot of personal attributes. He was a mechanical engineer by training. He dealt in industrial efficiency. He turned the industrial and manufacturing world upside down with his theories. And he, did a lot of work early on in his career in the industrial space, especially in the steel mills. But he gained his wealth and I guess his influence, especially when he started his own management consulting firm, and he derived a lot of wealth from the patents that he made in the steel making industry. So he had a lot going for him. Um, may not have been the most personable guy to be around, at least from the writings. You sometimes wonder, but uh, he was a driver when it came to um, industrial efficiency, manufacturing efficiency, and the principles of scientific management. But it was like the Bible for those types of industries. Um, he was known as a driver of scientific management. Again, as I said, made his fortune patenting steel process improvements. He was born to wealth and very well educated. His father was a Yale trained lawyer that made his fortune in the mortgage broker business. His mother was an abolitionist during the Civil War, and extremely well educated, and taught him. Frederick was homeschooled, and his mother did an exceptionally great job at homeschooling, well enough that he was admitted to Harvard to study law. But unfortunately, he had some eyesight issues because he had done a lot of reading as a young adult, child and young adult both, um, with very poor light, and it had some eye issues. So he decided he wasn't going to go the route of Harvard, and um, actually ended up going the apprentice route. He was going to do a 4-year apprenticeship. Now, while he was doing the apprentice route, his eyesight improved. Didn't go back to Harvard, but his eyesight improved. And as you walk through it and you think about it, his first job once he got out of his apprenticeship was at the Midvale Steelworks in 1878. And while he was there, and he moved up through the kind of climb that management ladder pretty quickly. He started out as just a grunt in the steel mill and worked his way up, made his to floor foreman, to shop foreman, to manager. And as he witnessed the work in the steel mills, he recognized that workers were not working as hard as possible. They weren't working up to their full capacity. And it generated high labor costs for not only Midvale Steel Works, but a lot of steel mills and a lot of manufacturing industry just in general. And he determined that workers and machines were inefficient, and he developed a term called soldiering, and we'll get into it a little later. But soldiering was basically, and I don't know why he called it soldiering. I've yet to find that bit of information out. But he applied the term for soldiering, and it basically meant that workers were not working up to full capacity. And if workers were not working up to full capacity, especially those that were using using the machines to do their individual tasks, then that led him to believe, and it was his theory, and it was a correct theory, that machines weren't being used up to capacity. And what Frederick Taylor was doing at that point, and he turned to this soldiering in the economics world. We would, to say he is focused on the marginal product of labor or the marginal product of capital, depending on whether he's talking about the labor, depending on whether he's talking about the machines and the capital investment that the firms had. And so basically what he was trying to do was develop a process and develop the strategy to maximize that marginal product of labor or the marginal product of capital. And he really enjoyed empirical research. He liked to study and analyze, and he was really focused on the productivity of workers. The human component of production, he determined, was scientific management. And that studied productivity. It studied the applied science of productivity. He actually went back and received his undergraduate degree at Stevens Institute of Technology, where he received his bachelor's in mechanical engineering. He focused on either productivity of the workers, they weren't being used properly, or he used applied science of productivity to determine that maybe they just weren't being developed, maybe they weren't being trained, maybe they weren't um, being empowered to move up to their full productivity. He opened his independent consulting firm in 1893, took a job in 1898 at Bethlehem Steel to solve the expensive machine shop capacity problem. And he determined that if you used a tungsten steel alloy, you could cut it 2 to 4 times faster. And by cutting it 2 to 4 times faster, you're not only maximizing or improving the marginal product of labor, you're improving the marginal product of capital. He developed multiple patents while he was there. Unfortunately, he was forced to leave in 1901 because of issues with other managers. He was, mathematician, he was an engineer, he believed in empirical tests, and he ended up with, involved in efficiency disputes with other managers. Like I said, he might not have been the greatest individual from a personality perspective, but I don't think anybody can argue that when it came to scientific management and utilizing empirical analysis and studies, that he was going to turn, again, industrial and manufacturing economies or markets or industries upside down. And he certainly went about that and did that. He presented the principles of scientific management in 1911, same year it was published, to the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, ASME. I'm not sure that that it was readily accepted. Let's put it in those terms. So if you've ever presented a paper at a professional meeting, you're going to have people, it's going to be the complete continuum. You're going to have people that like it. You're going to have people that are okay with it. You're going to have some people that hate it. Unfortunately, with Frederick Taylor, it seemed to be that it more skewed to the number of individuals that gave him pushback and criticized and critiqued his paper. And one of the reasons that they critiqued it and he got such pushback on it was he was trying to revolutionize the efficiency processes and manufacturing and industrial economies. And the information that he was providing, especially in this in the principles of scientific management, it completely turned those market economies upside down. It's a really easy read, and again, I can't remember. It's like 70 pages or something. I loaded a copy for you out there on Canvas, and it's a really interesting read. And the thing about it, and we'll kind of get into it a little later, either in this module or the next module. While it was published in 1911, 113 years ago, if you read through it, you will see that a lot of his propositions, a lot of his theories are still in use today. If Taylor could ever be accused of a crime, it was that he went into the industrial market economy and he just butted heads continually with the union shops. The union shops had a stranglehold on manufacturing and on industrial processes, and you put somebody like Frederick Taylor in there, and now he's turning it upside down. He's throwing out the terminology soldiering, and he's saying that they're not working up to capacity, and because they weren't working up to capacity, the labor costs were too high. Not working up to capacity, it meant that the machines were not being used to their capacity. So if he could ever have been accused of a crime, it was that, again, he might not have been the most personal individual, and he butted heads with the union. Taylor dreamed, he deemed work deserving of scientific observation and study. And that was the basis of pretty much everything he did. And again, we'll get into it a little farther along the way here. But when I went to work for Blue Cross Blue Shield in Buffalo, I didn't realize it when I took the job, but when I took the job, I inherited. I had about 100 people working for me, and I inherited 55, 60 of those individuals was a union shop on the operational side of the healthcare, claims process, payment integrity process. And I was probably viewed by that union staff the same way Frederick Taylor was viewed by the union shops that he butted heads with in the steel industry. The union shop in Buffalo, especially when I first got there, it was really ugly. And I'll kind of get into some more details a little later. Now, Taylor's principles of scientific management is based on 4 principles. And you will see a lot of information either out on the internet or in scientific journals, and they'll talk about Taylorism. So Taylorism was just renamed. I mean, that was rather than saying that, the principles of scientific management, they were just saying, Taylorism. So Taylorism and the principles of scientific management are one and the same. But principle number 1, he said, replace rule of thumb work methods with methods based on a scientific study of the task. Makes sense, doesn't it? When I took the job at Buffalo, walked into that union shop, I started looking at the goals that they had outlined for the union shop. And as we've talked in earlier modules on this class, you want goals to be, relevant. You want them to be achievable. You want them to be realistic, but you want them to be definitive. You want them to be black and white. And I've always liked that personal set of goals that you either meet your goal, you exceed your goal, or you've blown it out of the water and you've hit that stretch goal. And I like them to be binary. Either you hit your goal or you didn't hit your goal. And that was the approach that Taylor took. So I walk into the union shop in Buffalo and I'm looking at their goals and it says, our goal I started in 2010 in the fall. And so these would have been 2011 goals. And one of the goals said, we want to improve customer service. We want to generate more recoveries from inappropriate claims that have been processed. We want to see what else they say. Those are the main 2. I can't even remember at this point what the other goals were, but those were the 2 that struck me as being just unrealistic. They were rule of thumb goals. They had no goal. They wanted to improve customer service, and they wanted to improve the level of recoveries that they could bring back in or claw back from claims that were improperly processed, but there was no metric tied to it. And one of the first things I did is I remember reading this text at Ohio State, and I sat down, had one of my analysts generate me a computer program that would allow me to time, because a lot of the work that this union staff did was, processing different types of claims, processing, different subsets of claims. And so not only did I do it, but the other supervisors, there were 4 other supervisors on that team, and we all got computers, we all had this, and we sat and we started timing. And it actually brought back the topic of soldiering, because when I was sitting there timing these individuals, and they would be looking around, they'd be trying to talk to their buddies sitting next to them. They were putting steps into the processes that you normally wouldn't do. And I was constantly saying, here's the steps you should be following. I want you to focus on this. I said, if you can't focus on this, we're going to start all over again until we get accurate timing. So at the end of the day, we had timing set up for all of these processes that they were doing, and they hated it. They, I was, sometimes a little uncomfortable because there were times I'd be there by myself at night, and it was just not a good situation. So that was, late 2010. We had them in place 2011. And then the next thing you know is the union went on strike. They went on strike in late April of 2011. They were on strike from late April all through the summer. And we finally got them back to work in September. But everybody told me, kind of tongue in cheek, but people were accusing me of, causing the strike because I'd actually sat down and tried to develop some, following Taylor's approach, try to develop some empirical based goals that would actually provide a mechanism to manage and to evaluate these individuals with. The second thing that, his second principle, he said, scientifically select, train, and develop each employee rather than passively leaving them to train themselves. And again, 2010, moving into 2011, we revamped the onboarding process. We put some training programs in place. We had supervisors training and educating and trying to improve the processes that we had in place for each of these tasks that these individuals were doing. Again, it comes back to what? It comes back to maximizing your human capital. And that's what Taylor was trying to do. And that's what we were able to do in Buffalo. We were able to significantly improve the human capital. And as we improve the human capital, we improve the efficiency, we improve the overall productivity, and we started hitting operational and financial goals that they just could not believe that we could hit. Third thing, or his third principle, provide detailed instruction and supervision of each worker in the performance of that worker's discrete task. That's where you're back to policies and procedures. Have the policies and procedures succinct. Policies and procedures are succinct so they can drive efficiency. Individuals, if get confused, they can go up those policies and procedures. They'll tell them exactly what to do. Here are the steps you go through. Here are the results you should expect. Taylor's fourth principle, divide work nearly equally between managers and workers so that the managers can apply scientific management principles to planning the work and the workers actually perform the task. So go back to, I can't remember which module we talked about, but we were talking about organizational structure. So health plans, with the exception of United, for the most part, are structured in a functional type organizational chart. So in Buffalo, I had my payment integrity team, and this payment integrity team, including the union shop, we all reported up to the chief actuary, who reported up to the CFO, and the CFO reported up to the CEO. And not only was organizational structure a functional one, but the majority of the vertical linkages were up through the CFO. Now, we had some horizontal linkages, which they would reach out if they had questions to the sales team, or if they had questions to network management, or maybe there were some questions to the claims shop who processed the majority of the claims. But the majority of it was just vertical linkage and a functional organizational chart. And we didn't divide the work equally per se, but not only myself, but the managers and the supervisors, because we all had experience in doing the work. We could take, and because of our experience, our past experience in doing the work, we could take and allocate those tasks across individuals to improve efficiency and to drive productivity. So even though Taylor generated this thought process probably in the late 1890s, early 1900s, published it in his book in 1911, did the presentation at ASME. Uh, it still works today. If you work in a union shop, or if you go into work in a company where individuals have been there for several years, you're going to get a lot of pushback that, well, this is what we've always done, or this doesn't make sense. Why would anybody do that? Or I don't want to know how many I don't want to know how many widgets I'm supposed to make today. Just, let me work on my own, and I know how to do my job. You're going to get a lot of pushback. But if it's based on mathematical and empirical research, it's hard for anybody that is a rational individual that is not participating in soldiering to see that you're going down the right track and to see that your goal is efficiency. Now, one of the things that people, I guess, criticize Taylor for is Taylor was always looking for the best alternative. If you think about, some of the academics that we've talked about in class, they will talk about, multiple alternatives and multiple process steps. Well, Taylor was developing multiple process steps, but he was looking for that best alternative. He didn't particularly care about second best or third best. He was really focused from an efficiency perspective on that best alternative. And I think there's a place in the process management of the strategic planning and strategic management that we go through in the business world today. But there are other alternatives that may not be the best alternatives that are pretty darn good alternatives. And I think you always need to kind of have an open mind as you're trying to develop your strategic management processes. Taylorism, came to the forefront in the Eastern Rate case. It was a railroad case, and Lewis Brandeis, who later became one of the Supreme Court justices, coined the term scientific management in 1910, referencing Taylor's principles. Taylor turns around, he presents his document at the convention in 1911, and it is later published in 1911 in hard copy form, so that it could be distributed to a multitude of individuals that were interested. Taylor actually, what he was doing, and I think where he received a lot of his pushback, was Taylor was replacing old management styles of allowing workers to set their own pace with Taylorism and placing the responsibility of success or failure on the managers. He had a definite distinction between mental, which he coined as planning the work, and manual labor, which he coined as actually executing the work. So he definitely went about it looking at, you have individuals that are planning and you have individuals that are doing. So, and he had that definite demarcation between management and, the workforce. Introduction of Taylorism was resented by workers and provoked numerous strikes. Again, it went against everything that union shops stood for. Taylorism believed that the labor was worthy of hiring and pay should be linked to productivity. I mean, if you think about the current environment today, if you work, let's just, most of my time has been in healthcare. So if I go back to the health plans I've worked for, they generally set their introductory level pay based on market research. They'll look at the market, what are other health plans paying in a given area, and that's, kind of how they set their pay scale. Sometimes that pay scale will will, have a sign-on bonus associated with it. Depending on how many vacation days you get, and what benefits you look like, what your health plan benefits look like. Those are all pretty much driven by market forces. And that's where Taylor is talking about was worthy of hiring. And then he also says pay should be linked to productivity. And so I think of working for a for-profit, equity-based healthcare firm, Aetna, HealthNet, Centene, United, Cigna, all of them publicly traded. You're going to be paid a salary. In most cases, you'll be paid a salary. That salary will typically come with some COLA, some cost of living adjustment. You may, depending on what level you're in the company, you may have the option, you may have some stock options where they'll grant you some options that you can buy stock in the company if it hits a certain price. Hopefully there's a bonus included. So there's a lot of kind of pay for productivity in the current marketplace in this environment. And it's the same thing that Taylor was pushing at that time, pushing it through Taylorism. Owners of factories not using Taylorism actually hated Taylor. It evidently was not pleasant being around Taylor because of the pushback he got from factory owners that didn't implement Taylor's processes or his theories. Taylor's message may have required a suppression of some evidence. So, what they're saying there is, Taylor, in pushing Taylorism, as Taylor tried to reconcile labor and capital. Again, go back to the marginal product of labor, the marginal product of capital. He tried to reconcile those two so that they work together, so that you were maximizing the efficiency of labor, and in doing that, you were maximizing the efficiency of capital. So as he presents his paper at ASME, and as he publishes his text or his work in 1911, he may have suppressed, worker dissent. He may have suppressed a little coercion. He may have suppressed the human motives other than wage efficiency and a job well done. So, like a lot of maybe writers, especially maybe in academia, there may be some of the facts that were maybe a little suppressed, maybe twisted a little. But if you read through it, and here's the copy that I bought off the internet. It's the copy that I've loaded out there for you. It's a PDF version that I found for free. I can't remember how much I paid for that, but I didn't see any reason for you to have to buy it if I could find a free version out on the internet. So, but as you read through it, I think you'll understand that Taylor was before his time, probably misunderstood, but the basis of his, the principles of scientific management were well founded, and then again are still in use today. Taylor's management theory, as I said, it had a little flexibility, and he didn't rely a lot on different options or alternatives. He believed that by analyzing work, you could find the one best way to do a task. Taylor's stopwatch time study combined with motion study methods drove and developed the field of time and motion study. He would break jobs into component parts and measure each part. He'd sit there and do it with a stopwatch. It's a little easier now in the world of computers and Excel spreadsheets and different opportunities or different processes. But I think what he had going for him was definitely something that industry and something the manufacturing market economies definitely needed at that time. Critics of Taylor, and there's a lot of them. Many are, comes from, Marxists were critical of him. They criticized Taylorism because it subordinates the workers to management. Uh, there was an obsession with efficiency that allows measurable benefits to overshadow social benefits and social values. Um, at least that was the critique or the criticism of him. Um, I'm not sure I agree with the criticism, um, and I think if you go back to your microeconomics, if I'm not mistaken, as long as you are hiring labor, as long as the marginal product of labor, you want to hire labor as until that point where the marginal product of labor equals the marginal factor cost of labor. And at that point, if I'm not mistaken, it maximizes social benefits. So I'm not sure when I understand Marxism and maybe where they were coming from, and maybe it wasn't their cup of tea, but I think if you think about it, Taylor was, and we'll talk about it. I don't want to say it's the first paragraph in the text in chapter 1. He talks about prosperity, and we'll get into that maybe in the next module. But and the socialists, hated Taylor because he defanged the workers, uh, degradation of work, as management. He efficiency, was powered by capital. He rendered work repeatable, monotonous, and precise. He controlled went from the workers to management. He believed in division of labor and specialization. Again, he alienated, workers in the unions. But if you think about whether it's the Marxists or the socialists, and go back to your micro classes when you're talking about factors of production, you've got labor, you've got capital stock, you've got natural resources, which is land, you've got technology. But when you think about the factors of production, technology, it's more concerned about the process of production, the black box. So if you think about the technology of the black box, you've got inputs coming in, they go through the black box, outputs come out the other side. And then also you've got kind of overarching, the three main factors of production and technology. Over here, you've got entrepreneurship. And Taylor, with his, principles of scientific management, Taylor was over here with the entrepreneurship and the technology side. He was trying to improve the efficiency of the production process, the efficiency of the production function, so that you could take these three main factors of production, run them through the black box, and generate a higher level of output coming out the other side. And when the Marxists and the socialists talk about, division of labor and specialization, that goes all the way back to Ricardo and Adam Smith. They talked about specialization and, in the earlier, significantly earlier than Taylor. And with that, we're going to stop. When we come back, and I'll probably just have this video for module 11, and then I'll do another video for module 12, where we'll get in and actually talk about the text itself. We'll kind of go go through this. Again, it's at least the version I've got, it's 76 pages. And it's a really easy read. So go out to Canvas and grab that PDF version and read through it. You should be able to do it maybe in a night. But it's an easy read. So next time we get together, we'll kind of go through the summary of that little book, and we'll see how maybe a different take. You'll have some of the similar concepts that'll appear in the next module, but there'll be a little different twist on it. Talk to everybody next time.